Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for waiting. I hope you're all having a lovely day. Had a little bit of a late start there, but here I am. Here I am, and we're going to have yet another one of our great late night conversations. I'm going to put on the opening music, and we'll go from there. Thank you. Had a little bit of a break, but now I'm back. I'm back. So let's put on the music. Let's put on the music.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Alrighty, everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you. The last 2 days, I worked pretty hard. I was at the United Nations for many hours because Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, was in town, and I reported on his being in the United Nations. And I will say the speech that he gave on Tuesday morning was utterly amazing. And I intend to post that on this YouTube channel if I can. It was really something special. I have never heard such a thorough explanation of U.S. imperialism and what's going on in the world and the clash between the two new emerging economies. It was really, really something. So stay tuned for that. I will make a point of highlighting that on this channel. It's been a wild couple days. We're in the heat of the summer and all of that, but I am back. We all know what happened, which is that there was an assassination attempt against Donald Trump. I streamed right after it happened, and then I streamed once more afterwards. We talked about it on this channel, which is good. We got a chance to talk about it. And the Republican National Convention is happening right now. A lot of amazing things. I will say what I have seen of the Republican National Convention. I mean, obviously I don't agree with a lot of things being said, but a lot I do agree with, and it's really something special. It really is. I mean, I am blown away. I am blown away because some crazy things are happening in this country. And it seems like there are people in the Republican Party that are trying their best to sound like they want to really fix things and like they have the kind of solutions that we talk about on this channel, that they want a strong economy, they care about working families, they want a government of action that does something about it, they want to stop the wars. I mean, put all the pro-Israel stuff and all that aside. The Republican convention right now is crazy. Like, what country am I living in? This is amazing. So keep in mind that. But the way we do these live streams, for those of you who may not be familiar, if you're new to this channel, the way we do these live streams is I give my opening remarks, which is whatever it is I'm going to talk about for the evening. And then from there, we do a roll call where I call you all out as I see you. Excuse me. Names and locations. And then from there, I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. So if there is something you would like to talk about in the second half of the program, by all means, send a super chat on YouTube or send a Rumble rant on Rumble. I will do my best to give you an answer. If you're watching on Facebook, I can't see the Facebook chat, so you're going to have to get on Rumble or YouTube and send your question there. I'm going to jump right into it. It's weird. I was feeling full of energy a minute ago, but for some reason I'm starting to feel very tired now. So maybe I won't be on here as long as I planned. We'll see. My strength may kick up as we go. I've been energized all day. I rested all day, and I had a great day. But maybe I don't know. We'll just see. We'll see if my strength kicks back up or not as we go. But I'm just going to talk about 3 topics and how they overlap and how they are related. And there are 3 topics that generally don't go together. Occasionally you'll see them together, but I think they all have something unique to say on the one hand, and I think they all kind of overlap and they play a similar role in people's lives. And obviously, the topics are Marxism, spirituality, and psychoanalysis. And obviously, the topic in that category that I am the most familiar with is Marxism. Marxism, spirituality, and psychoanalysis. But I have done a fair amount of research into the other 2 categories. I feel like I've developed a much more psychoanalytic approach over the years. I feel like spirituality is a very important aspect of what I do. So I'm going to talk about all those things. But the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about why these 3 things are important. Because these 3 things, spirituality, Marxism, psychoanalysis, they all exist to serve a real need that human beings have. We have our physical needs. We need to eat. We need to sleep. We need to breathe air. We need shelter. In order to procreate, you need a partner. You need, to procreate. There are certain basic animal needs that human beings have. But because human beings have a brain, and because we have a consciousness, and we have thoughts, we need more than just to have our physical needs met. I think they say man cannot live by bread alone. We aspire for something else. And that something else that human beings aspire to is generally called ideology. Now, ideology is one of those words that people, especially in intellectual circles, throw out a lot. They throw out a lot. But this is what ideology means. The dictionary definition is a system of ideas and ideals, especially one which forms the basis of economic and political theory or policy. And Wikipedia defines ideology as a set of beliefs or philosophies attributed to a person or group of persons, especially those held for reasons that are not purely epistemic, in which practical elements are as prominent as theoretical ones. What in the world is ideology? Well, I explain what ideology is by using the car analogy. If you're driving down the road, and you're driving down the highway, you know where you came from, you know where it is that you are going, and you know the route through which you are getting there. And that ideology is what gives you that for your life. Tells you where you came from, tells you where you are going, what the goal and destination is, and it tells you how you are getting there. Ideology tells us who we are, tells us how we should live our life, and what goal we are hoping to attain, what the ultimate conclusion is. And that's very, very important for human beings. People need ideology because they need that. And I've often said that if you're driving down the road, you know where you're going, you know where you came from, you know how you're getting there, you're fine. But if you have a Joe Biden moment and then you suddenly forget where you're going, forget where you came from, forget how you're getting there, you're going to be in a bit of a hard spot now, aren't you? You're probably going to stop the car. And that's why postmodernism is so dangerous. This philosophy that says there is no real truth, that the only good and practical thing to do is to engage in deconstruction, to take apart ideological systems. That worldview, that there is no truth, that there is no grand narrative, there is nothing that holds the universe together, that the universe is defined by chaos rather than order, and that deconstruction is the highest good, and that we can, assert our own will over reality. This is all very, very dangerous because it leads to people stopping the car. Oh, Terry must like what I'm saying. It leads to people stopping the car. They need to know where they're going. They need to know where they came from, etc. Well, Marxism, spirituality, and psychoanalysis are all in an attempt to answer those questions. And I'm going to quickly go over my understanding of what these three things are. So Marxism is a political movement. It was more or less founded in 1848. Marx was around before that, but it didn't really establish itself as a political movement until the 1848 German Revolution with the publication of the Communist Manifesto. And Marxism is an attempt to explain history and reality with the philosophy called dialectical materialism. There are two schools of philosophy. One is called idealism, and idealism says that the mind created reality. The ultimate reflection of idealism is the idea that God created the world. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God created the world with his mind, with his thoughts, and we are a reflection of the thoughts that existed that laid the basis for the universe. And idealism goes further and says that with our thoughts, we can change the world. With our willpower, with our beliefs, we can change reality. Materialism says the opposite. Materialism says that thoughts, feelings, etc., they are merely a reflection of material, right? That idealists say that it was the thoughts of God that created the world. Thought came first, and the world is a reflection of thought. Materialists say that thoughts, ideas, feelings are just a reflection of a material reality. That's materialism. But dialectics is the belief that the world is constantly in a state of change, and that change comes through conflict. And so Marx combined the philosophy of materialism, saying that all that exists is matter, and that thought is just a reflection of that matter. I think Engels said thought is inseparable from matter that thinks. And so Marxism said all that exists is material. All of our feelings and emotions just reflect that material. But it goes further, say that material is constantly changing. That material is never the same. And that material is constantly changing and clashing and advancing toward a higher plane of existence, right? And so that's the dialectical materialist philosophy on which Karl Marx founded his movement. And his movement argued then, from dialectical materialism, it developed what was called historical materialism. And historical materialism is the notion that human existence is the struggle to reach a higher mode of production. That we were hunter-gatherers in the woods, and we were constantly trying to be better at hunting and gathering, constantly trying to have more food, constantly trying to have more fruits and nuts to gather. And so we got so good at hunting and gathering that system became outmoded. We were too good at hunting and gathering. There was a scarcity of animals to kill. There was a scarcity of fruits and nuts to gather. So as a result, we had to, at that point, revolutionize our mode of production. We had to domesticate animals. We had to grow crops and grow our own food in order to continue existing, because the mode of production of hunter-gatherer civilization had become outmoded, and with the origin of agriculture, we had a higher mode of production called slavery. Slavery eventually gave birth to feudalism, and out of feudalism emerged capitalism. And that capitalism, as we get better at capitalism, as we advance our ability to produce goods, capitalism is becoming outmoded. And that eventually, Marx argues that capitalism will be replaced with socialism, where the means of production, the centers of economic power, will be rationally organized in the interests of society overall. And that eventually, as a result of rational planning of the means of production, we can have a world where there is so much abundance and wealth that the very need for the state fades away. That the very need for the government itself fades away. That there's so much in existence. People are so comfortable and have what they need that there's really no need for there's really no inequality of any kind. People can just do what they feel like doing, from each according to their own ability, to each according to their needs. And, I think, I'll tell you, I guess I'll just tell you what I think, which is that I think that what you call historical materialism is very, very true, right? I mean, hunter-gatherer civilization gave birth to slavery, gave birth to feudalism, gave birth to capitalism, and capitalism moved into the stage of imperialism, and imperialism resulted in countries breaking free from that and having socialism. And so I overall agree with the historical materialist understanding. If you look at how the human economy and how human technology and how human beings' production has worked, Marx was very well accurate when it came to how human society was evolving over time, and how human beings and our ability to produce was expanding. And I think that he was absolutely right about. Now, his philosophy of dialectical materialism and his belief that all that exists is material, I think he's not right about that, but I'll get to that later. But Marxism is a materialist philosophy, and one of the problems of Marxism that Marx himself acknowledged was called economic determinism, which is there is no room for the individual will, right? In Marxism, Marx even says in letters, why am I doing this? What is the point, right? There's letters where Frederick Engels talks about this with students, and that, there's historical inevitability. Basically, the economy will function in a certain way that people will have to just do this. And there's not really a room for heroes. There's not really room for sacrifice. There's not really morality, right and wrong. It's just kind of everything will just kind of sort of happen because this is how history works. And, the economy functions this way, and people work according to their own economic interest. And that is a critique of Marxism. If you read, the book, The Role of the Individual in History by Plekhanov, he gets into this question, and that a lot of the criticism of Marxism, a lot of the people in Marxism who've developed their own critiques, whether it's the New Left, whether it's, what came into existence of the Soviet Union or whatever, a lot of them have said, look, you need to create room for there to be an individual willpower. And this belief that feelings and thoughts, etc., are just a reflection. The only reason you think is because you have this piece of matter in your head called a brain, and that emotions and feelings are almost all just an illusion, right? That we're just material, right? We're just material that happens to be in the form of a human body. It kind of leaves something out of the wonder of history and the wonder of human existence, right? It kind of views mankind in the same way a scientist in a lab might view a fungus that he's studying the growth of. And it kind of leaves out a very big aspect of the human experience. And that's a fair critique of Marxism. And that if you look at Marxism throughout history, despite the philosophy itself saying that there's nothing spiritual, and despite the philosophy itself reducing everything to materialism, saying that everything just kind of inevitably happens, you see Marxism exuberating, causing a lot of people to be very heroic and make self-sacrifices, a lot of people to work against their own interest because they believe in the cause. So, there are aspects of the Marxist philosophy and worldview that I think are not correct, but the overall historical materialist understanding of history going through stages, I think, is largely correct. I think socialism is better than capitalism. I think the problem of overproduction that Marx pointed to, and the problems of the capitalist mode of production, are much more, obvious today than they were before. Capitalism, in its stage of imperialism that Lenin identified, necessitates countries, if they want to break free from that, moving towards socialism. So, we can look at Marxism as a philosophy as being pretty on point. So that then brings me to spirituality. Now, spirituality is separate from religion. And this is where people are going to probably disagree with me. People in the chat, people who watch this later, and that's fine. You can disagree with me. But when I say spirituality, I'm talking about themes that you can find in pre-Abrahamic religions. I'm talking about individual religious experiences that people can have. I feel like with religion, things are very straightforward. If you are a member of the Roman Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church has very specific teachings. It has very specific rules that you follow. It has a very specific church hierarchy. It's all set in stone there, right? And if you're a Muslim, right, your Muslim tradition, whichever tradition of Islam you come out of, they have specific rules. They have mosques where you go and pray. You do the 5 pillars of Islam, etc. But humans have been religious long before the Abrahamic religions. Judaism is a similar thing, right? If you're an Orthodox Jew or a Reformed Jew or a conservative Jew, there's certain rules that you follow. There's certain practices you go through. But pre-Abrahamic religions, it wasn't so straightforward. In the age of polytheism, and in parts of the world, you talk about pre-Christian Europe, you talk about China, China before the communist revolution, you talk about India and the origins of Hinduism, you talk about Native Americans and their religion. It's not so straightforward. There are local customs and beliefs, but it's much more about individual feelings. It's much more about wisdom that is passed down generation to generation, certain legends and stories and myths that are believed but are understood to be not exactly true but important, right? And are reinterpreted. And it's also very much about one's own direct connection. The feelings one gets through engaging in prayer, the feelings that one gets through meditation, the experiences that one has, the dreams that one has, it's much more focused on individual experience, the passion, the emotions, as well as the wisdom that is passed down. And while there are organized groups, etc., when we talk about spirituality, we're talking about something a little bit different than formal organized religion. We are talking about something that has always been a part of the human experience, and something that very much emphasizes individual human passions, feelings, and emotions. Something that also talks about ancient wisdom and tradition and stories. We're talking about something a little bit different than the formal organized religion of Christianity or Judaism or Islam. We're talking about an aspect of human beings that has always existed. And if you look at spirituality, all right, we're talking about, not just religion. Religion is like a subcategory of spirituality. Religion is a very formalized, structured form of spirituality. When you look at spirituality as a tradition, there's so many different interpretations of it. There's so many different experiences with it. But there are certain themes that are pretty consistent. One of them is that almost every faith tradition has some notion of the fall of man. And that's very interesting, But every faith tradition has some notion of there was a good world at one point. There was a perfect world. There was some kind of ideal situation. And then we as human beings made some kind of choice to separate from it, right? And obviously in Christianity and in the Abrahamic tradition, you have Adam and Eve. eating the apple, getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden. But ancient Greek mythology, Norse mythology, the traditions in Asian countries, almost all of them have some notion of the fall. There was a perfect world before. Usually there was this very small number of people. It's not always just Adam and Eve. It can sometimes be a bigger group of people, or, it could be the gods that were around. Humans maybe didn't exist first, but there was the gods or whatever. But from there, we got away from it. And almost every faith tradition argues that there will be some kind of climactic moment in human history where some kind of epic battle or epic climax of human existence takes place, and then afterwards we will return to that idyllic state. In addition to that, spirituality recognizes, and what really defines spirituality? Spirituality recognizes something beyond the material world, right? Materialism says that all that exists is matter, and whatever feelings you have, those are just a reflection of the material world. It's just you reacting to the material world. That's something, it's just some kind of illusion, or some kind of, way that your physical mind, your physical body is reacting to the material world. But we also know that, when it comes to the spiritual tradition, the spiritual world says that the human existence, or not the human existence, but the material world is just one plane. And that beyond the material plane, there is something else, right? That when you die, your soul, your consciousness continues to exist in some other universe, whether it's heaven or hell or some kind of afterlife or the next world or whatever you want to call it, right? Is that your consciousness can continue to exist beyond your body, right? That your consciousness is attached to your body, but your consciousness is not just a physical aspect of your body, right? That your body, your body is hosting your consciousness at this time, but with your mind, with dreams, with prayer, you can connect to other planes. And that when you die, your consciousness will continue existing in these other planes. That's a big aspect of spirituality, right? Is the belief that your consciousness, the part of your mind that thinks things, your soul basically is capable of existing outside of the material world, and it is not simply a product of the material world. That's a big aspect of spirituality. And spirituality tends to believe that a lot of the feelings that you have, this is where it gets very, very interesting. A lot of the feelings that you have are rooted in ways that you are being affected by the non-material world, right? Whether you're being haunted by a ghost, whether, the higher power God is trying to teach you something or trying to point you in a certain direction, whether, the devil is trying to tempt you and move you, but the thoughts that you have, the feelings that you have, the moods that you have, your interactions with other people are all affected by something beyond the material world, right? That there is a non-material world that is affecting your feelings and your experience and your emotions. And that's a big aspect of spirituality in any tradition, right? It's not simply that you personally, that you just go through life reflecting on the material world around you, but there are non-material forces that are affecting you and pushing you in certain directions, pulling you in different directions. That's an aspect of spirituality. And so then that brings me to psychoanalysis. Because psychoanalysis is a very, very odd, it has elements of both spirituality, and Marxism in it. It is neither Marxism. Its founder, Sigmund Freud, denounced Marxism. And in fact, I have the book that Sigmund Freud wrote where he addressed the question of Marxism. I have it here somewhere, Civilization and Its Discontents, which is an interesting book. But like Marxism, psychoanalysis is atheistic. It doesn't believe in God, and it seeks to explain feelings and emotions as rooted in material and biological origins. Right. So Freud did not believe in God, and Freud very much scoffed at the notion of religion, and he viewed religion as some kind of primitive mindset left over from the time that human beings were a lesser species, right? You know, religion is left over from when we evolved from monkeys or whatever, right? And Sigmund Freud, right? He was a very emotionless person. He was a very selfish and predatory person, but he came across a lot of truth about how human beings feel and how human beings interact with each other. And that while, like Marxism, Freudian psychoanalysis seeks to explain everything in a material way, like spirituality, it has a passed down wisdom, right? And the thing about all of these things, there's no scientific experiment that you can do to prove spirituality. Now, there are various people have tried this. Right? I think Carl Jung and others tried to prove the existence of God with scientific experiments and all that. You can't do that. Right? Carl Jung said that, those who believe in God and those who have a spiritual existence are much happier and healthier. They live longer, but that doesn't mean that they're right. It just means that they have a need fulfilled, the need for ideology. They see why they exist, and that the need for religion, with that fulfilled, they can be happier people. But it doesn't prove that religion is true. Marx claimed his philosophy was scientific, and he argued that it was scientific. He called it scientific socialism. And it is, in the sense that it's based on what can be proven in the material world. Marx didn't write the Communist Manifesto because I have a feeling. He based it on actual observations he had about the world. But many people, especially students of science, have pointed out and said, well, no, Marxism isn't really scientific, right? Just because, yes, Marx backed up what he said with true things, like any person would do when making an argument, Marxism isn't scientific in the sense Marx didn't do experiments, right? There was no control group, and Marx wasn't putting on his lab coat and doing experiments with groups of people to prove things, right? Marx did use data, economic data that he acquired from the British Museum to develop his research, etc. But Marxism is not scientific in the sense that the term is normally used. It is, if you use it to mean that it is based in observations of material reality and not feelings, etc., then you can argue that it's scientific. But Marxism calls itself scientific. Spirituality does not call itself scientific. Psychoanalysis also claims to be scientific, but many people have also pointed out, just like with Marxism, where's the experiment? Right? It's been 150 years, it's been 200 years since Sigmund Freud. There has not yet been one experiment to prove any of his concepts. There's not yet been any actual scientific research to back up any of his claims. And that there is a whole field of psychology that is very scientific, that does do all kinds of research and does notice trends in how people behave and how people react to things. And actual psychology largely looks at psychoanalysis and says this is bunk, because there's no scientific method involved in psychoanalysis. But that doesn't change the reality and the acknowledgement that you can't escape, which is that modern understanding of how the mind works, modern understanding of how people interact with each other, is hugely stamped by Sigmund Freud. And as has been pointed out before, when you think of Sigmund Freud, people laugh because they think of some of the more outrageous things he said. And those are the things he's known for. However, there are a lot of things Sigmund Freud invented that are just taken for granted right now. One of them is the notion of the subconscious mind. No one had ever talked about that before. The idea that you have thoughts in your head that you are not aware of. The idea that you have memories that you repress, that you've pushed backward because you don't want to deal with them. That is all accepted. Everyone accepts that we have a subconscious mind. That's just kind of considered to be standard, right? The concept of an ego, of a superego, of an id, right? The concept of libido. All of these things are things that Sigmund Freud thought of, and we just take them for granted. Talk therapy was invented by Sigmund Freud. No one had ever had any such thing had it ever existed. You can talk about maybe the Catholic rite of confession. You can talk about some of the traditions that Jewish folks did around developing spirituality with Kabbalah, but ultimately talk therapy as a method of helping people overcome their mental illness. That's largely a big part of what goes on. I mean, people are required to go to talk therapy now, by courts. I mean, it's such a huge accepted part of our culture. Sigmund Freud invented that. So, there are a lot of things that Sigmund Freud invented that are taken for granted now. And psychoanalysis, while it is largely not considered to be scientific because it doesn't involve experiments, it does try to argue all of its points by fitting it into a material world. It denies the existence of a spiritual plane. It basically scoffs at the notion of spirituality, but it also has this ancient wisdom that is passed on, right? It is very much, that Freud explained it to so-and-so, explained it to so-and-so. There's different schools of it, just like there would be with a religion. There's Reichian psychoanalysis, there's William Alanson White, there's Lacanianism, there's all kinds of different interpretations that fight with one another about what is true. So psychoanalysis is an ideology. It tells you who you are, where you came from, where you want to go, how you eventually get there, right? And psychoanalysis, basically, the worldview of psychoanalysis is this, right? They argue that your mind can be divided into three categories, right? Your ego, which is your regular thoughts, etc. Your superego, which is the voice of a parent, the voice of God, the voice of someone you're trying to please, your superego, and your id, which is your animalistic drives, your animalistic desires for sex, for violence, for food, for shitting, for sleeping. You have your basic animalistic desires, you have your ego, which is your conscious mind, and you have your superego, which is the voice of someone telling you to be good, someone encouraging you, telling you what's right and wrong, how to act, etc. Right? And you have that in your mind, and that you go through life trying to avoid pain and seek pleasure, trying to feel like you are doing the right thing, trying to feel like you're a good person, and that, human society has existed, that we all have to control our impulses and desires. And there are a variety of patterns in human thought and behavior that Sigmund Freud observed over the course of his life. And they were patterns that developed largely in the Victorian family, the Victorian European family. He was based in Austria, that he observed, which were about how human beings interact with each other and how people see themselves in relations to others, right? The most famous is probably the Oedipus complex, the idea that, fathers and teenage boys don't get along with each other. And he takes this back to the ancient Greek play Oedipus, about a young man who murders his father and marries his mother. And the idea is the father is threatened by the teenage boy's sexuality. The teenage boy is anxious to prove himself and feels suppressed by the father. And so the teenage boy is young and he's full of testosterone, and he is trying to prove himself. And the father is old and is starting to lose his strength. So he's desperate to suppress the teenage boy, finds him to be a threat. And the two of them fight with one another, right? And that the teenage boy constantly fears castration, that the father is going to cut his balls off, right? Not literally, but the father is constantly trying to make the teenage boy less manly, make the teenage boy less strong, trying to emasculate him. Whereas the father is very afraid the teenage boy is going to kill him and take the wife from him, take the mother from him, right? Or render him sexually impotent, make him to the point that the mother no longer sees him in a sexual way, right? And that there is this sexual tension between the young man and the father, right? That's Freud, and I think the Oedipus complex, while obviously the literal understanding of it, right? I don't know anyone who literally wanted to kill their father and marry their mother. Obviously, that the literal understanding of it is not real, or is not prevalent, I guess. The reality of this is very widespread, right? I mean, and it goes much far beyond just one individual teenage boy and his father. It's a very widespread trend, right? I mean, teenage boys are constantly rebelling. Older men can't stand teenage boys and find them to be the worst thing. And that there is, when you talk about youth politics, etc., this is a real reality. And, and it plays out in women as well. Freud didn't pay as much attention to that, but it plays out in women as well. And, teenage girls and their mothers fight with each other in a similar way. Maybe it plays out, maybe there are different dynamics in the way women are in our society, but the tension is certainly there. And that this kind of generational tension, it all serves a purpose, because when you're a teenager, you're in the process of breaking with your family and going out on your own and becoming an adult and getting married and starting your own family. And that, the tensions that begin in the teen years kind of lay the basis for you eventually going to do it. The young man is tired of being humiliated by his father, tired of being told what to do. So he goes out into the world and he starts his own family, and he proves to his father that he's strong and powerful. And he no longer is under his father's dominion, and he starts his own family with his own kids. I mean, that's how these things are supposed to work. And that the Oedipus complex is part of driving that to happen. Right. And, Freud has the whole thing about phases that people go through, phases that babies go through, and the whole thing. I mean, you can go through all of it, right? The psychoanalytic worldview, it is like Marxism in that it's an attempt to be purely materialist, but it's like spirituality in that it is very much concerned with feelings and emotions, and that it is a wisdom tradition. And, while Marxism doesn't really pay that much attention to people's feelings and emotions, right? Marxism is very cold and calculating, especially if you read Marx, right? It's very cold and calculating. And again, you wouldn't know that, right? Again, people who think wokeism is Marxism, the woke people are very emotional. The woke people are that's not Marxism, right? That's not traditional Marxism. Actual straight Marxism is very dry. And it's very, very straightforward economic determinism. And, it's not obsessed with the willpower of individuals and right and wrong and shaming people. And, I will say that, with all these topics, nobody knows anything. But, with Marxism, it gets particularly frustrating because everyone in America is supposed to know something about Marxism. Marxism, communism, after all, is the enemy. Right? It's the enemy. And so everyone's supposed to know about it. But what people know about Marxism has nothing to do with it. I was taught in school, communism is everyone gets paid the exact same wage no matter how hard they work. Where is that written anywhere in Marx? I've never seen that written anywhere. Right? It has absolutely nothing to do with Marxism. Right? The idea that, and on the 5th day of the revolution, the same wage shall be paid to everyone. I've never seen that. Right? No one knows anything about Marxism. People think Marxism is a group of people walking around saying some people have more money than others and that's no fair. And it's like, that would be very emotional, right? And that's not what Marxism is at all, right? Marxism is a very, very materialistic philosophy about how human beings have changed their mode of production and gotten to a higher plane, and the class struggle driving forward history, and capitalism holding back human development, etc. Right? Marxism is a very, very dry, emotionless philosophy. The caricature of Marxism that we have in this country of Marxism being people who want everyone to be absolutely equal or something. That has nothing to do with that. The actual philosophy of Marxism is very, very dry and calculated. Whereas spirituality is all about passion. Marxism dismisses passion, emotions, feelings. It's all just a reflection of the material world. Spirituality is all about feelings, emotions, and passions, and says that basically your material existence is only a temporary thing. It's just one plane, and that the ultimate world is passion, emotion, spirituality, etc., and that your material existence is just like one angle, one small part of your existence, and that most of your existence is spiritual. And psychoanalysis is very much obsessed with feelings and emotions, but it's obsessed with finding a way to explain them in a material way. And it's developed this long, complicated wisdom tradition to explain it, which is similar to spirituality, in that spirituality has long, complicated wisdom traditions to explain how you feel this way. Legends, stories that are passed down, rituals, ceremonies. It's all about managing your feelings with this ancient wisdom. Psychoanalysis is also about managing your feelings with ancient wisdom. Marxism dismisses your feelings and is more concerned about organizing the economy of society. So all three of these things kind of overlap, and they all tend to serve the same purpose, which is trying to tell you why you're here, trying to tell you what to work for and what to strive for, trying to tell you how you should live your life, how you should see yourself. And all three of these schools of thought are more or less intended to hold people together. Psychoanalysis was never really intended to create any kind of mass movement, but it held one together with their analyst, with their therapist, I suppose. Right? Spirituality, those spiritual movements and spiritual traditions bring people together, always have over the course of thousands of years. Marxism, it created a modern political movement. It's had an influence on all kinds of mass movements that have existed. But, there's a story that I want to tell you all. And many people have heard this before. And I'm getting to the point where I am reflecting on this story a lot. Because as I try to understand the world around me, and as I try to change the world that I'm in, as I try to, figure out who I am on an individual journey of self-discovery, as I try to work with other people and help them figure out how that they can make a greater contribution, they can connect with other people more and be more creative, as I try to build a mass movement to change the world and try to stop the danger of a new world war, I end up coming back to this story more. And the story goes like this. There was a group of blind men. And these blind men were all put in front of an elephant. And with their hands, because they could not see, they all felt the elephant. And afterwards, they were asked to describe the elephant. And one individual, he thought the elephant was like a snake because he had felt the trunk. One individual thought that the elephant was a wall because it was hard because he touched the side of it. Another individual thought that the elephant was small, like the tail. Another individual thought the elephant was like a tree trunk because he touched the leg. And that all of them were correct. None of them were wrong. They just couldn't all see the full elephant. And that I'm starting to realize that a lot of these ideologies are like that. They wouldn't really catch on if they were 100% wrong. In order for ideologies to catch on, they have to be somewhat correct, or else they don't develop a mass following and they don't catch on. Mass ideologies tend to point to some real solid truths, but they're all pointing to different aspects of that truth. And the actual truth is often much more complicated than we realize, And it's a whole elephant. It's not just one part of the elephant that we can touch. And that, I guess that's when I get accused of being eclectic. That is how I am eclectic. I am a very spiritual person. I do think psychoanalysis shreds a lot on how, we can understand human relationships. Marxism has been the foundation of my life largely since I was a teenager, and I've visited communist countries. I've become a lifelong anti-imperialist. But I realize that the communist governments of the world are all now saying, Marxism itself, classic Marxism, didn't have all the answers. They're becoming more open to spirituality. They have a market sector, etc. So Marxism has changed. I also realize that, the spiritual movements that exist, they can't avoid getting political. They don't want to. A lot of them want to stand back from politics and just say, let's all just be spiritual. But they can't, because there are real forces in the world today, and that the people that are part of these religious communities, they live in a society and they are suffering, and that that if you believe in right and wrong, government policy and the way society is organized has a lot of impact, and can be a reflection of how a society treats people. And on top of that, psychoanalysis, the bulk of the people that draw from that tradition admit that, yes, it was off in a lot of ways. Freud had this concept that eventually you'd become the perfect person. It was no longer neurotic, right? He said that most people are neurotic, and there's a type of person who's psychotic, which is that they're not in touch with reality. They're not processing information correctly. Most people are neurotic in that there are patterns in their life that they repeat, they don't learn from. And Freud had this concept that there'd be somebody who's neither of those things. They're just, they're completely perfect and all that. No such person has ever been found. Right. And Freud, a lot of the things he said, he took them to rather ridiculous conclusions. He was pointing to certain truths about how human beings interact with each other, truths about the family. But beyond that, he was doing a lot of conjecture and a lot of taking things to wild conclusions. So we take from Freud, talk therapy. We take from Freud the notion of the subconscious. We take from Freud certain aspects of the way human beings relate to each other, of the way the mind works, the subconscious, suppressed memories, the subconscious mind, the super ego, the ego, and the id, right? We take these things from Freud, but we realize that Freud himself wasn't a very good person, had sex with most of his clients, which would be completely unethical and would get your license revoked in any modern psychological or psychoanalytic practice. He had sex with most of his clients. He was a predator in some ways, and he was a bit cold-hearted and judging and a bit self-interested, and then, disregarding the needs of others. So we can look at all of these ideologies or this way of understanding the world and say that there's elements of truth in all of it. And I think that that's an important thing to do, right? And that if we do want to change the world, we're going to have to learn from the world around us. One thing I will say that I am very annoyed with is that I'm on here. I just gave you this presentation, and there's very little material that is written in plain language like this. If you're talking about Marxism, if you're talking about spirituality, or you're talking about psychoanalysis, there is this belief that you must explain it in the most non-understandable way possible, right? And I it's the academic tradition or whatever that I'm on here just telling you what it is. This is what it means. And that there is not an effort to do this by Marxists, by spiritual voices, or by psychoanalysts. And in fact, there is a frowning on that. If you do it the way I just did, well, that's considered to be pedestrian. That's you're not smart, and I have worked really, really hard to be able to explain concepts pretty straightforward and coherently, to understand them and explain them. That is what I have worked really, really hard to do. But in all three of these traditions, there is an effort to not do that. because it's not about actually getting people to understand it. It's about showing off how smart you are or something like that. And I find that to be hugely annoying. I mean, maybe I appreciate it to some degree on the part of people I don't like because it prevents them from connecting with people in the same way that I do, but I shouldn't even think that way because that's a competitive mindset, right? That all of these things are only as good as people can utilize them to make their own lives or the world better, right? Spirituality is only as good as somebody who can take it and find spiritual fulfillment, live a happier and more ethical life, treating others better, living for the sake of others. If your spirituality can do that, great. But if it can't, what good is it? And the same for Marxism, right? Marxism, the basis of Marxism is to build a mass movement, to oppose imperialism, to oppose capitalism, to change society. And if your Marxism doesn't do that, if it just publishes a bunch of books or it just makes you feel smart on the internet, what good does it serve, right? Psychoanalysis, right? If through engaging in psychoanalytic practice, learning about your own behaviors, examining your relationships with other people, you can become healthier. You can interact with other people. You can become aware of your own desires. You can think about some of your underlying motivations, and you can be more calculated in how you live your life. It's great. But if it doesn't do that, it doesn't serve any purpose. And I see a lot of bullshit Marxism, bullshit spirituality, and bullshit psychoanalysis out there, right? None of these three schools or three ideologies, if you want to call them that, are good and do you any good if they don't serve their real purpose. Marxism is supposed to make a mass movement. Spirituality is supposed to build a community, help you live a more happy and spiritually fulfilling life. Psychoanalysis is supposed to help you interact with people better, become aware of who you really are, and thus act in a more principled and calculated and self-interested way, and do what is in your own best interest, and have healthy, fulfilling relationships. And if it doesn't do those three things, what is the point? What's the point? And I see all three everywhere not doing that. And that's a problem. That's a problem. And I see all three of these being used as a way for someone to, inflate their own ego. Right? I'm the great internet Marxist or the great real life Marxist. I'm the great spiritual guru. Oh, great. Good for you. I'm the great psychoanalyst. Again, if you're not, if you through teaching these concepts, through building a community around these concepts are not helping achieve their stated goal, then they're not really serving a real purpose. And that all of these things can be distorted to become a form of entertainment. There's a lot of so-called Marxism, BreadTube. I wrote a whole book, BreadTube Serves Imperialism. That's entertainment. That's not Marxism. They're not building a mass movement. I'm kind of glad because the mass movement that they would build would not be a good one, but I pointed that out. They're not even really building a mass movement. ContraPoints, with all of her money and her huge audience, if she made a video supporting the Uhuru movement, they would probably drop the charges the next day. But she will never do that because, Hillary Clinton is boosting her, and so why would she do that? And that would be activism. That'd be connected to the real world. Instead, she makes a 2.5-hour video about Twilight and sexual fantasies, right? Because it's entertaining, right? Yeah, Twilight, great movies, sexual fantasies, 50 Shades of Grey, whatever. You watch the ContraPoints films, it's just entertainment. And it's entertaining. I enjoy watching her work, even though I don't always agree with what she has to say, even though I find some of her conclusions to be erroneous. It's entertainment, but this isn't supposed to be entertainment. Marxism is not supposed to be entertainment. It's supposed to be about building a mass movement in order to achieve the goal of creating a stateless, classless world of vast abundance. Spirituality, again, it can be very entertaining. I can go to a great show, but if it's not building a community, if it's, what is it? How many Christian TV channels are there? TV preachers, you can go to mega churches where they got the big lights and the loud rock music. Okay. But if it's not helping me to live a more moral life, it's not helping me find the spiritual fulfillment I'm looking for, it's not making our society better, what purpose is it serving? in psychoanalysis, right? Again, I see a lot of people who think that they're very, very smart and, all kinds of psychoanalytic analogies, Zizek, right? Yeah, Zizek is full of psychoanalytic stuff. And again, I mean, is reading Zizek helping you to understand your own internal desires? No, and I see all three of these concepts, all three of these ideologies abused and distorted into a form of commercialized mass entertainment. And this is what Peter Coffin talks a lot about with fandoms and his critique of fandom, right? That fandoms are ultimately capitalist for-profit entities. They're about making money. And so they gradually become less and less political over time. They tend to be about an individual, and they're not sustainable, right? Eventually, you'll change the channel. If it's just about entertainment, commodified experience, commodified identity associated with an entertainment experience, eventually you change the channel, right? You watched this show for a while, now you watch that show, next you watch that show. It doesn't actually have the impact of building a community or changing the world. So I guess, this may have been an esoteric presentation. I mean, I'm not reacting to current events. I will react to, I'm going to show Lavrov's presentation on a future stream. I'm also going to react to the Republican convention and everything that's happening. But tonight, I just wanted to just talk about what these three things are, the purpose that they serve, etc., and just kind of lay this out there and how they all kind of overlap. Because if you look at psychoanalysis, you look at Marxism, you look at spirituality, they all serve a similar purpose for individuals, and they all overlap to some degree. Not in a perfect way, but there is overlap between all three of them. So I just wanted to share that with you all. I thought that was something I could talk about tonight. And I hope you enjoyed it. That's just kind of what I wanted to do tonight. I am feeling a little bit tired still, but that's my presentation. So why don't we do the roll call? I'll call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, I will answer people's questions. I see that we have one Rumble rant that has come in, and then we've got 5 super chats. And if you have any more super chats, that'd be great. So we got Bob in Troy, New York. Welcome. John McCarthy in Chicago. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. Alex Rickel in Oregon. Jesse Shearer in Portland. Chris in Salt Lake City. Mohsen from Iran. Gabby from Chicago. Seneca, South Carolina. Boston, Massachusetts. Noah. Boise, Idaho. Mads in Massachusetts. Very, very good. Very, very good. Names and locations. James Turner in Boise, Idaho. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Charles Dominic Williams in Malta. Peter in Sweden. Chris, the seasoned noob. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. Patrick in Maine. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you. Patch in Arizona. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Maddie in California. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. Names and locations. Anybody else? Dan Niswander from the Los Angeles area. Very good. Philip High, Brooklyn in the house. Welcome, Philip. Raphael in Glasgow, UJ. Where is UJ? I don't know where that is. UJ. UK. Glasgow. You're up in Scotland, right? Glasgow, UK. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good times, folks. Good times. I want to encourage everybody, if you haven't been watching, to please watch the morning messages. They are getting great. They are really getting great. I am really happy that our community is making them. They're really helpful. They're really inspiring to people. If you want to submit one, you can. We do appreciate that if you submit them. Oh, we got Megan in Kansas City. Welcome, Megan. Baruz in Boston. Welcome. But yes, we've been having morning messages every morning on the CPI YouTube channel, and they're really tremendous. It's a great way to start the day with revolutionary hope and optimism. Funky just submitted one. Very good. Thank you, Funky. I will take a look at it. We got one scheduled for tomorrow. And there's been great ones so far. I mean, some of them are, all of them really are absolutely phenomenal. They're really, really great, and they're on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. So they're on the CPI YouTube channel, and they're really, really great. If you'd like to submit one, like Briggy just did, all you need to do is there's a link that Peter Coffin created where you can just film it and drop it. Right? It really requires very little work on your part. You just have to film it. Just put the camera in front of yourself, talk into the camera, and you've got a morning message. Yeah, there you go. I can announce that. Yeah, sure. And you got a morning message, and it's great. Yeah, if you would like to submit one, you can submit one here. And it's really, really tremendous. So there we go. There we go. I do want to say that I am trying to get into a post-social media mindset because what matters to me is the community that I'm building, right? Because the Center for Political Innovation, our community is on fire right now. It's on fire. We're building, we're constructing, we are doing outreach. We just had an outreach meeting yesterday. After a long day, we had a meeting of the outreach committee. I was just blown away, and we've got events coming up, and I'm excited about our community. I must say I'm very excited about our community, but part of that means just not caring about social media anymore, right? And that social media is very much a distraction, and that it hurts our community because every time social media, every time we are not building our group, every time we're not doing outreach, every time we're not connecting with people, the result is that the toxicity of social media seeps into our community. And we have to push back against that. We are about building our community of solidarity. We support the Uhuru movement that's under attack. We absolutely support the Uhuru movement. They need support more than ever. The trial is going to start on September 3rd. And that is really, really important. We are building for a very important demonstration that'll happen at the United Nations. And this is Phil's petition. If you haven't signed it, go ahead and take the opportunity to sign it about healthcare. We're going to oppose any sanctions on any country that relate to healthcare. That's Phil's petition. There's going to be a demonstration at the United Nations to support that petition, and that will be on September 24th at the United Nations. I put the link in the chat. But I am at the point where I want us, and every week I'm doing classes with people. We have our Saturday Zoom calls for the Center for Political Innovation. And then we also have our weekly, outreach, kind of meeting where we discuss doing outreach and what we're doing. And I am at the point where I am trying to not see this as a social media operation. I am trying to get to the point that I see this as a real community that I'm building. And that doesn't mean we're not going to try to have big events, right? I am convinced that our next convention that we're having will have well over 400 people at it very easily. But I am at the point that I see how negative social media is, how negative it is, how toxic it is, and how fake it is, that I am doing everything in my power to not play the game, right? I will probably still have news hooks on this YouTube channel every so often. But I'm not saying, like I said before, hit the like button. If you want to hit the like button, the subscribe button, the notifications bell, that's great. But I'm not going to keep repeating that because I just don't want this community to be about that, right? And I really don't. And that as long as we're on that hamster wheel of trying to get more clout, we're going to be we're going to be lost, and we're not going to be aiming at building the community we need to build. We need real connections. We need a real community of people. And that's what we need. We don't need social media attention, right? Social media was a great start. It was a great way to get this going, but we don't need that. And I must say, my friend Jyoti Brar, I love Jyoti, a very dedicated anti-imperialist activist. And, to see, how recently there was a split in her organization of a group of people that were just got addicted to social media and they went elsewhere. And that, look, there are people who are very big on social media who are not real, right? Who don't have mass followings. I've told you all that. If you add up every single person that's part of the MAGA communist milieu who's actually come to an in real life event, you're talking about less than 300 people. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, right? And we need to build an organization that can win over the bulk of the population. And if we continue this childish fronting, this childish effort to be the king of MAGA communism, this childish effort to, get attention or outdo somebody else or whatever, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. And it's just not productive. We need to focus on our community. People like Gabby, who do great work. We need to give people like Gabby our attention, not people that we don't know on the internet who probably are not even real, right? And, we need to hold our community together and get our community to do real outreach. We are hoping that this fall, it just depends. We have to have the contacts first. But this fall, we can have some very powerful workshops for new people in the Midwest, right? But we have to get the contacts first. And, as an organization, you have to learn to walk before you run, right? You have to crawl before you walk. And that right now, we are in the process of getting a constant inflow of contacts, following up with those contacts, building the connections. That's what we're doing. Right? And staying connected with people. And part of that is the morning messages. Every morning, members of our community make messages so that people can be connected with each other. And I got to tell you, that has a very powerful impact on our community. When people are plugging in every morning to do the messages, to connect with other people, it gets people going and stuff happens as a result of it. It's kind of amazing. So we're going to keep the morning messages going as a way to keep us connected. I'm going to keep doing these streams because you all love hearing me and I love engaging with all of you, but we are going to get out of the social media mentality because it doesn't serve a purpose. It's a distraction from what we really need to do, right? These streams are good in the fact that they hold the community together, but these streams are not good if I'm trying to get attention from them or I'm trying to win social media, whatever the hell that means. They're not good in that sense. They're not good at all. And I think a group that we should really look up to as a group that we should aspire to be like, and I guess this brings me to the first super chat, is the Uhuru movement, right? The Uhuru movement is a group that, they're not huge on social media, but they are huge in terms of actual organizing. In St. Louis, Missouri, and in St. Petersburg, Florida, they have a real base in the Black community. They have farmers markets in the Black community. They have community centers where people go. They have real support in the Black community. They have a real base of people who get services from them and learn their ideology. And that's why the U.S. government has targeted them and is trying to put them in prison. Because they have a real base of people. They are actually building an organization. And if you look at it, it's social media is not a measure of where you're really at. The government can tell that, that they are in a position where, as we head toward a more revolutionary situation, they could be in a very good spot. Well, that's not reflected on social media, is it? There's a lot of people that are huge on social media that are nowhere near where they at, right? They are nowhere near where we're at. But in terms of actual organization, they're doing really well. So the first super chat. I've got, but there's a Rumble rant first. So I'll do this, and then I'll do the Rumble rant, and then I'll keep doing super chats. And super chats do support me and my ability to keep doing this every night and getting on here. So if you can send super chat, that's a great way to support me in my work, get me talking or whatever. But we're going to put on Chairman O'Malley's analysis of the shooting of Donald Trump. We're going to put that on. And then, the attempted assassination. And then from there, I'm going to keep answering people's questions.
On July 13, 2024, as Donald J. Trump was delivering a campaign speech to a crowd in Butler, Pennsylvania, an alleged gunman on the rooftop of a building 140 yards away opened fire on the former U.S. president. Trump survived, though the shooter killed one person in the audience and critically injured two others. The Biden administration and the FBI claim they are searching feverishly for a motive and have already begun to project the theory that the shooter, allegedly a 20-year-old white man named Thomas Crooks, was operating alone and not as part of a larger plot. In the African People's Socialist Party, we are clear, however, that the specific motive of the shooter is not the real question. The fundamental question is the rending of the social fabric in this country right now is the question of free speech. When Trump was shot, he was speaking. The bullets fired at Trump represent an escalation in a war against speech that exposes the deepening crisis in the United States social system, a crisis that has reached a point where the violent suppression of speech that has always been a reality for African and colonized peoples has now penetrated into the white colonial population and even the ruling class. For African and colonized peoples in this country, the right to free speech has never existed. To be shot at, bombed for speaking has been the norm for generations of African and indigenous people who have spoken out in pursuit of our freedom. The right to speak has increasingly come under serious assault in this period of heightened repression and censorship, punctuated by the US government's attack on our party and our movement on the July 29, 2022, and the subsequent bogus prosecution of myself and the Uhuru Three. We have often said that in the 1960s, when our Black Revolution had defeated colonialism ideologically and politically, the US government abandoned the arm of criticism and replaced it with criticism by arms. Now criticism by arms has become deployed, is becoming deployed. Now criticism by arms is being deployed within the white ruling class between contending sectors who are vying for control of the colonial state. The notion that someone can be shot for speaking is something that African people have always found repugnant. From the time we were brought to this country in chains, African people have faced severe restrictions on our right to speak or otherwise express ourselves. We remember Emmett Till. Under colonialism, freedom for African people has always been illegal. When the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights to the US Constitution was ratified by Congress in 1791, African people in the United States were still enslaved on plantations. The First Amendment, therefore, was not for us, but for white people. The First Amendment was created by and for white people who had left Europe to escape the tyranny of kings, who came to the United States, stole the land from the indigenous people and captured and enslaved African people. And running from tyranny, the colonial settlers imposed a new form of tyranny over Black and indigenous people here. The Constitution was not for us. The law which has governed our relationship to this country was clarified by the Dred Scott decision of the Supreme Court in 1857, in which the Chief Justice, Roger Taney, ruled that Black man had no rights the white man was bound to respect. This truth about our relationship to the colonial legal system transcended whether it was a liberal or conservative Supreme Court. It was the opinion of the Supreme Court, period. What changed this ruling was not another ruling, but the Civil War that ended the formal, that resulted in the formal end of enslavement of African people in 1865. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were ratified in that period. However, these amendments also did not confer rights upon us. Otherwise, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 would not have been necessary, and I wouldn't have had to do the work that I did during that period that brought those Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act into fruition. This is why legal scholars have defined our relationship to the United States government as de jure freedom, that is freedom in law, but de facto unfreedom, not freedom in fact. African people have always struggled for free speech. When the government attacks the Uhuru movement for exercising free speech rights, they attack free speech rights, period. It is not my free speech. It is not Black people's free speech. We had none to begin with. Ultimately, we are being used as surrogates to attack everyone's right to freedom of speech. The U.S. ruling class stages their assault on free speech by choosing what they assume to be an unpopular target, Black people. They assume whites will go along with their assault on free speech by using Black people as the target. In the real world, they are trying to get white people to act against their own interests by winning their participation in an assault on the rights of free speech, which were created for white people in the first place. You can't take free speech from Black people who never had it. Garvey didn't have it. Nat Turner didn't have it. If we never had it, you can't take it away. But you can use the attack on me to make an attack on the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment that is supposed to be for everyone. The July 29, 2022 attack on me, the African People's Socialist Party, and the Uhuru movement was an attack on our right to win free speech rights for African people. The subsequent indictments of me, Penny Hess, and Jesse Neville, the Uhuru Three, were indictments and threatened 15-year prison sentences because of our fight for free speech rights. We, Black people, have been the torchbearers of democracy in this country. We have fought for free speech, for the right to vote and participate in the electoral process. Everything that resembles democracy in this country is a consequence of the struggle by Black people. When the African People's Socialist Party ran 2 candidates for office, the U.S. government said those campaigns were paid for by the Russians. This notion that our participation in 2017 and 2019 in the electoral arena was motivated by Russian direction is absurd. Nothing could be more ridiculous. How could Russians teach us anything about our struggle for democratic rights in this country? Have Russians faced water hoses and bombings of their churches for trying to vote? Nobody in the U.S. has paid a greater price for the right to vote than Black people. We fought and died for it. King was assassinated and others lost their lives in the process of just winning the right to vote. The free speech assault against the Uhuru movement will not end with the attack on the Uhuru movement. It does not require that you like Trump to recognize this. When you attack our free speech rights, you attack everybody's free speech rights. When they kill King for speaking, kill Malcolm X for speaking, when the United States government indicts and threatens imprisonment of Omali Yeshitela for speaking, they incite anyone else to attack others for saying something they don't like. They will call them lone wolves, but they are following the examples of the United States government who have initiated this violent assault on the right to speak with their bogus prosecution of the Uhuru Three. Everyone must fight for freedom of speech and association. Years ago, the United States government attacked our Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida in 1996 with over 300 police forces, including FBI and other federal agents, because they said they were concerned about what we were going to say about the case of Tyrone Lewis, an 18-year-old African who had been murdered by the police. The St. Petersburg police attacked our building and claimed that we were holding an unlawful assembly, it was an attack on free speech, but not a single civil libertarian defended us at that time. The attack on the Uhuru movement's right to free speech was then and is today an attack on constitutional rights, attacks on rights that are supposed to apply to everybody. These attacks on constitutional rights will always start with attacks on Black people and the indigenous people. It's your rights they are treading when they come for us. It's more than simply saying that if they come for us, then they can come for you. The truth is that when they come for us, they are coming for you. In 1893, Frederick Douglass wrote, quote, "Men talk of the Negro problem. There is no Negro problem. The problem is whether the American people have honesty enough, loyalty enough, honor enough, patriotism enough to live up to their own constitution," unquote. So this statement by Frederick Douglass is the fundamental question of our times. What about free speech, America? Will government imprisonment and assassination continue to be acceptable templates for resolution of political differences? As for the Uhuru movement, we are initiating a summer project here in St. Petersburg, Florida, Freedom Summer, where we are calling on every freedom-loving person in the United States to come to St. Petersburg, Florida, and participate in a SNCC style, a Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee style anti-colonial freedom movement that will conclude with the end of the victory for free speech in the trial of the Uhuru 3 on September 3rd. So drop the charges on the Uhuru 3. Hands off the Uhuru movement. Uhuru.
That was a great message. I'm sorry, folks, my strength is fading fast, but I'm going to put on the video that we made about the Uhuru case. For those of you who are not familiar with the Uhuru case and what that is, it's a short video we made explaining, why the Uhuru case is so important.
After the rioting was done, U.S. media kind of forgot about those communities. Well, Uhuru, they went out there because they saw Black and brown people like themselves that were out there protesting and rioting, and they stayed there. And they've been there since 2014, providing services in the community, giving these young people in the community something constructive to do, not just go out and break shit to raise awareness about the conditions they're in, but ways to actually feed people and serve the community. And they've been there in St. Louis since 2014 doing constructive work. They have really escalated these programs. They have a farmer's market. They provide classes and services to pregnant mothers, and in particular in St. Louis, Missouri, and in St. Petersburg, Florida. They're trying to undo the damage that the U.S. Department of Justice and the state police and the local police and all the forces have been doing in communities like Ferguson, Missouri. And at the same time that they've done this community work, the African People's Socialist Party has also taken a firm anti-imperialist stance. They support China. They support Russia. They support Cuba. They support Iran. And when the United States started piling weapons into Kiev, they defended Russia's right to intervene.
This defensive war in Ukraine that Russia is actually waging against world colonial powers, not Ukraine as a single entity, but the U.S. and all colonial powers who have an interest in colonially dominating African people right here in this country and around the world and extracting resources from the majority of peoples on the planet. That system, this current system, is in severe crisis, and they cannot rule in the same old way.
Because of that, their homes were raided. Then months later, the federal government came out with an indictment, and it's charging them with being Russian agents. And it's trying to allege that the election campaign that they ran in St. Petersburg, Florida, was somehow interference in the U.S. electoral process.
4 activists associated with the People's Democratic Uhuru movement and the African People's Socialist Party have been indicted by the U.S. Department of Justice. The indictment from the U.S. Department of Justice accuses them of spreading Russian propaganda and cites simply some web conferences that they had, some Zoom meetings, some emails they sent out, as well as the fact that they have run routine election campaigns. Is this of concern to the Secretary General as an attack on human rights, freedom of assembly, etc.?
I frankly was not aware of the case before you mentioned it. Let me look into it and I will get back to you.
What's going on in Africa is directly connected to what's going on here. What's going on in Ukraine is connected to what's going on in Harlem. You know what I'm saying? It's an international global economy That's all connected.
Because they go to conferences in Russia, this constitutes Russian meddling in the elections. The whole thing is ridiculous. It's completely, utterly ridiculous. They've been running these campaigns for years, since before I was born. Back in the 1970s, they were running people for office. Their platform of reparations, I mean, Marianne Williamson, she's a major Democrat candidate. She also says she believes in reparations. I mean, it's not a unique message that they have in that sense, but they have been targeted because they're doing what you're supposed to do. I mean, you know, at all of our meetings, we have a picture of Fred Hampton up on the...
Folks, I'm not feeling well. My strength has just reached its conclusion. I must have underestimated how tired I am. I did take a picture of the super chats, and I will answer them. They will not be forgotten, but I need to end the stream here. I'm not feeling well. I'm too tired. So hopefully I'll be back tomorrow. I'm ending it now. Sorry to end this abruptly. I just have to end it tonight. Thanks.